All right, everyone. Welcome to Campfire number 17. This is going to be a very special campfire. We have Brendan Roman with us and his cat. What's the name of the cat?
Her name is Leona, but my wife and I
Leona.
call her
Leona
baby.
wants some love or food right now. Either
Yep,
way. It's
I
funny
just fed
how
her, so
cats are very much, tender and they want you in the evening, I've noticed. So it's the evening for you, 6 p.m.
6 p.m. She's very fickle, and I just fed her.
Yeah.
Worried about this happening, but it's love time for her now.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. So welcome, Brandon. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. I know you've seen a few, so you know what to expect. Hello, everyone who's online as well. We are broadcasting live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Facebook right now. And you probably know if you've seen the show before. You can ask any question that you want. We have the chat right here. We'll get to your questions, and Brandon and I will do our best to answer them. You can also join me and Brandon live. Like if you have a microphone and a video, a camera, you can actually join from your phone as well. I'm going to put the link here, but if you click that, the dial-in link, you're going to be able to actually join us live, ask your question, and we'll do our best to answer. It's kind of think of it as what you used to do as a kid, dialing into your favorite radio host, and you were like, "Oh man, I'm live, I'm on the air." So we'll do something like that as well. So Brandon, you have a phenomenal journey, and really the title of this campfire is "How to Transition into a Coding Career." When I looked at your background and how you went to becoming a developer, it feels like it doesn't get better. Like you've really succeeded in achieving your goal. So let tell us a little bit about yourself. Like introduce yourself. Don't go straight to what you're doing.
sure.
Actually, talk about what you're doing right now. But I'd love to also know where you're coming from. What did you do before you became a web developer?
Yeah, I had a very different professional life prior to my career as a developer, and what that looked like is I've come to understand is very similar to what a lot of folks who make the transition into programming, what it looks like for them. Prior to this, for 5 years or so, I was working in insurance, car insurance. I sold insurance, I managed policies, and then I moved over to claims, and then I moved up into management. And I don't have any degree in computer science or really any background in it. And at the time, I studied business and psychology, and that was kind of my first job out of college. And I kind of rode that train and that career path because it was kind of presented to me, and I was good at it. But that didn't mean I enjoyed it. And so it took a lot of self-discovery in my career, earlier in my career, to understand that like something didn't feel right, and there was a lot of friction in what I was doing.
Yeah.
It got to the point where I was really unhappy, and I thought maybe it was like time for a change of pace. And so I moved into a new role at another company, still in operations, but it was more with like data analytics. And
Oh, okay.
I was in charge of training and education, but I was also in charge of a team of data analysts, right? And so in those roles, I started to become, in love and enthralled with like Excel and VBA and all these things that all of these folks that worked with me were very good at. And so I would ask them to teach me a little bit about what they knew. And right around this time, this was probably early, I want to say late 2019 or early 2019, was around the time that I found out that the company I was working for was going to undergo layoffs. And there was a lot of, uncertainty around who was getting laid off, what time.
Mm.
And it was also around that time that I started teaching myself JavaScript. This was prior to me discovering NewCamp as a student. So, I had to make a decision, a really tough one. And that was talking with my wife about, I know that I'm really interested in programming. I don't necessarily know what the world of programming looks like, what the career path looks like. I have friends I know that do this for a living, and they really seem to love it. I know there's a lot of flexibility, and the pay can be very good if you're proficient at what you do. And what attracted me most to it, though, was this idea of like having this specialized, concentrated skill. And that was something that in college and even younger in my profession, I just didn't really feel like I had. Right, I was kind of a problem solver, and any problem I would have would be some operational, revenue, or process problem that I was tasked with facing that I didn't necessarily have like
A
professional
trade
skills.
skill, right? Something
Yeah.
that kind of that is unique to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. In operations, it all felt like I was so replaceable all of the time. So that's what
Yeah.
kind of, elevated this sense of panic and anxiousness probably when I decided like, hey, maybe I'm going to get laid off, or this doesn't look so certain. So after a conversation with my wife, she was incredibly supportive. Her name is Maggie, love her to death.
Hey,
She
Maggie.
she supported me in saying like, hey, if you want to go ahead and take 6 months to figure this out, and instead of waiting 3 months to find out whether or not you get laid off, kind of take the situation in your own hands. Uh, Quit your job essentially, and study your butt off, and see what you can do. And for 3 months, that's kind of what I did prior to finding NewCamp. And so
So
NewCamp
did
was
you
kind
did
of a
you did you resign then? Was your first step resigning from your company?
yeah, that was my first
Oh
step.
wow,
I
that's
had
huge.
a little bit of understanding of JavaScript. I had done some Udemy courses, and I had
Yeah.
done some really basic minor like websites, but it was really a huge risk, and probably something I would advise against most people doing if you don't have a
Yeah,
really
yes.
solid
Actually, you had.
plan.
I mean, you didn't know. I mean, you had a job, you had an income, but I guess being married, maybe you could actually afford that as a.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
didn't. Let me say this: I didn't do this completely. Let me just quit my job. It was
yeah,
something that
yeah.
my wife and I had to track out financially if this was something we could do. And while it wasn't ideal, right? Because you're losing in a marriage, we were losing one of our incomes.
Mm.
It was something that we could supplement with the help of wise saving in the years prior. So,
Pretty cool.
um,
Hey, before you
yeah,
go further, let me give people
sure,
who are listening to you kind of a context as to where you are right now.
sure,
So you, and we're going to talk about the details of that, but I want them to understand. You joined New Camp. You graduated, I think it was July 2020. And then we asked you, I mean, you were an exceptional student. We asked you to join, or maybe you offered to join, and you taught the 4 weeks HTML, CSS, and JavaScript course in August. So right after I think you graduated, you taught um, your first 4 week course, and you got. Oh, actually, no. You replaced an instructor.
yeah. I was called in a pinch to be a
Oh,
backup
that's right.
for an
You
instructor.
actually
Yeah.
just for 1 week, so you got a taste of it, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. At that point, yeah. So just to kind of provide some context around that, it feels like it's been a very long time. Prior to joining New Camp, and even as a student, that is to say, I had some experience, and so coming into New Camp I really wanted to learn React, and what the job market was like for that, and kind of target myself toward this direction, kind of put my sail in a direction. And so after I graduated New Camp, that whole time, I know New Camp offers part-time, all these part-time opportunities, but I was, every moment I wasn't working on a New Camp assignment, I was trying to study or trying to do a Udemy course. And that's something I want to get into a little bit later, like the whole process
Yeah.
around finding a job and preparation. But yeah, I joined New Camp as an instructor shortly after graduating. I was just a pinch backup instructor for HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. I loved doing it so much, and felt like the results that I had were good, and so I continued to
And
teach.
so that was your first assignment. And by the way, take a moment to appreciate the amount of uh, encouragement and love and respect that you're getting online right now. From Matt, Matt was on the show. Brendan is the man. From Zach, hey Zach, good to see you here. Amazing instructor. Happy to hear things are going well, Brendan. I wonder, were you a student with Zach?
That's so
Or
cool. I think Zach Ballard was one of my students actually. He
he
got
was
a
one of your students. Cool.
yeah. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. It's good. Wow, I'm actually looking at the comment section. This is
Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
crazy.
Thanks, man.
Fabian, one of your
Current
current
students.
students right now.
Yeah,
Juan, best competition with Juan. Super enthusiastic.
man. Yeah, you guys are gonna make me emotional. Holy cow. Thank you. Yeah, no, these are
Pretty
all
cool, huh?
students or teachers or folks I've interacted with at New Camp. Thanks, guys.
Emmanuel as well. Man, we're all joining. That's awesome. So here's the thing. So you taught HTML first, one week or one actually workshop, and you got a 4.64 rating, very first assignment, which probably was the most frightening because I mean you were just doing it as an instructor right after graduating almost. And then you continued on Bootstrap, I guess the month after. Yeah, the month after. And your first Bootstrap course, I'm looking at it right now. You had a 4.95 rating from your students out of 5, almost a perfect score, which is extremely rare. And so you've taught with us ever since. and then you moved on to teaching React. And I don't know if you know what your rating is right now, average rating all up.
I couldn't tell you. I should probably know that, but I couldn't tell you.
4.81, which is
Wow.
just phenomenal,
Wow. Yeah.
across 427 feedback from students. So, I mean, it's not a surprise that folks are joining the stream and kind of saying all the nice things they're saying. So this is where you are with right now with NewCamp. But so tell us a little bit about. I want to go back to those days of learning to code using VBA. Like, tell us those Excel days. Did you actually write VBA code in Excel? Was it your first kind of experience?
That was my first, yeah, that was my first foray into programming. Yeah, it was like very, and it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. You know,
Oh yeah,
I didn't know what programming was. I just knew that like it started with me making macros in Excel, right?
yeah.
Just no
It's a
code at
great
all.
way to get started. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody is using Excel,
Yeah.
right? And you actually have a very, I mean, VBA is super old in terms of language, but it's super powerful. I mean, you can do a ton of crazy stuff
Yeah, you
with
can.
Excel and VBA.
I had no idea. Like it was like my first foray into like practical programming. I'd say
Yeah.
not just like,
Yeah.
you know, let's just make a hello world. It was like, hey, like I can actually make the lives of my people that work with me easier by automating workflows for them, right? That they would spend hours doing. And so that was kind of the positive feedback loop that started to kind of connect. We're like, wow, like I love this. This is so
It's
cool.
been so long since I've actually coded in Excel. Like you probably can learn functions, right? You're gonna learn the concept of functions when you do VBA in Excel. You're gonna learn the concept of variables, of course. Can you do loops in Excel VBA? Can you
Yeah,
actually do complicated stuff like that?
you can, yeah, you can get pretty pretty advanced with how much you can do with you know repeating the same you know processes and creating functions that you call later. It's very similar. It's all syntactically looks very different. But I'll tell you this, like if you asked me to write a line of VBA code now, I couldn't do it because it took them so long.
Well,
You
it's
know,
like everything. You forget fast, but then you can
yeah,
just Google it and it'll come back in an instant, I guess.
I was never an aficionado either. When I say
Yeah.
I was learning VBA, that was like me saying, wow, this is really cool. Like, you know how to do this. And so it's for me to even say that I was close to proficient or an expert at VBA would be a complete fib. But it was, for me, it was like this awakening of, I love doing this. This is something I want to do with the rest of my life. And you know, it was difficult for me to learn, but it was just so rewarding that there was this real life payoff to my job that kind of set me off in this direction.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Ionella is saying hi. Oh, Nicoletta. That's Nicoletta.
Hey, Nicoletta.
So, all right. So from VBA, you learn JavaScript using Udemy courses. Have you tried to really teach everything yourself as a self-taught developer? I mean, at what point did you realize that, okay, maybe I need to get into a coding bootcamp?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of what's the right word? I had a lot of insecurity around what I was. This is like a deep-seated thing that I think most people learning to program will probably learn about themselves, or maybe they learn that they don't have this problem. But for me, it was this deep-seated insecurity about like not having this trade skill, not necessarily knowing what the job market looks like, not feeling like I had a community or mentors to even help me. It's just this feeling of isolation when you're trying to teach yourself things, right? Like, am I learning the right thing? Do I have the right curriculum? And everywhere you go online, you know, one place would tell me to learn Python, another would tell me to learn React, another would tell me to learn Vue or Angular. And it's kind of like this noise. And you kind of, after a certain point in time, just need to make a decision for you know, what direction do I want to go in? And you just have to commit to it and learn it. If it doesn't work out, at least you have you know, a trade skill in something that might be transferable elsewhere. So for me, when I made the decision to learn NewCamp, it was because I had kind of learned JavaScript, HTML, and CSS at a very rudimentary level, right? Just to make some side income, because I couldn't just, in good faith, I couldn't just, you know, sit by doing nothing for 6 months. I started like a small LLC where I would make like landing pages for local businesses and try to get a little bit of, you know, $100 or $200 to just do favors for local businesses in the area.
So hold on. So you were kind of a freelance, but before starting your coding bootcamp.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't good, you know. This is a learning experience for me, Ludo. Like, you know, I quickly learned that I didn't want to freelance. I quickly learned that like this was going to be a lot more complicated, and so that kind of manifested itself in just like making a couple small WordPress sites and all of that, and then realizing like, okay, I don't want to make landing pages. I want to be a software engineer. I want to solve problems with code that I might be having in my life, or work for a company that makes things easier for people. So that's kind of answer that question.
Oh, hold on. Nightbot is writing stuff that I programmed for Don's stream that happened last week, but we're not having Don anymore. So let me fix that. Hold on a sec. There
All
we
good.
go. Disable, enable. Wow, perfect. Okay, so that's still very interesting that you decided to try the freelancing route without necessarily being confident in your coding skills, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And
um,
it did work out for me, right? Because like I made sure I was honest in like what I was capable of doing, and I made sure I undercharge and all these things,
yeah,
but
you were super affordable, I guess. Yeah,
yeah, and it's great experience, right? Because you're trying to build a portfolio, you're
yeah,
trying to get your name out there and make connections, and that's a great way to get started. It's just that for me, it was just a little ambitious for me at the time, I think, and but I did learn a lot, that's for
yeah.
sure.
So, why did you pick NewCamp? Because at that moment you were full time. You were ready to learn full time, and
Yep.
NewCamp is part time. So actually, I'm very curious because actually I know there are several students of ours that are learning with us full time, even though the program is wired to really allow for part time. So, yeah, how do you make that call, the decision to join a part time program while you could actually do it full time?
I think like, I'm going to say something probably controversial, so I hope you're not mad at me when I say that.
Go
Like,
for it.
I think that like any, what people need to learn, or what they need, like when they're learning this to program anything, is more important than anything. You can get all the material for free, right?
Yeah,
I can go on YouTube. Like there's no extra, there's value everywhere for free on the internet. It's just like, what people need when they're learning is a community. They need like a curriculum, and they need some kind of structure in what to learn and when. And that's what I
yeah.
felt like I was like super missing. And I had like there's these a bunch of other free resources I was using, but I kind of started to realize that I didn't have all the answers. And I believe I saw an advertisement for NewCamp on Facebook, and I'm going to be honest, like I thought it was too good to be true. I thought like
The
I
people still think that.
yeah, I think there was like I was getting tons, and because I was Google searching all this programming stuff, and I was on some of these websites, I'm sure like Google was giving me like tons of different boot camps, like tons of them. I could
Yeah.
name a ton that I had already looked at, and there were income sharing agreements. There were everything that just seemed predatory and like a scam. And so I remember looking, like I was looking on Reddit, I was looking like at reviews for NewCamp, and just because of how affordable it was for me, like that was the no brainer. Is like I had 6 months, I had some money stored away. I
Yeah.
couldn't just join a $15,000 boot camp. I couldn't just sign an income share agreement. I feel like that would have been a very irresponsible thing for me to do. So, I saw NewCamp. It was really appealing to me, and it seemed like it had great reviews. And so I went. It was remote. That was a huge thing, right? Because this was around the time of pandemic when that started to hit. So for me, it was a no brainer.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? And you're actually saying, I mean, it's exactly what I would say as well. At the end of the day, the value that you seek in a coding bootcamp cannot be just the curriculum, because the curriculum you'll find, I actually promise you, better curriculum for free online.
Yeah,
True. But what you're not going to get is the structure, the community, the support. Really, when you join a coding bootcamp, you're paying for the instructor, you're paying for the structure, you're paying for the student admin that's going to help you if you have problems. You really are paying for that environment that allows you to know that what you're learning is what you should be learning, and really allows you to learn with others collaboratively and etc. So, which is why it doesn't necessarily make sense to pay for a $15,000 coding bootcamp,
yeah,
except I will say if you're doing it in person.
yeah. I think
But,
that's fair.
but
That
anything
yeah.
online, yeah,
And so yeah, you said it well. Like there are even parts of the curriculum in the NewCamp curriculum where they're important to know about, right? Like they're very prevalent in software engineering. That ever since I've started working for the company I'm working for over almost 2 years ago now, it's a conversation of like, okay, like you can put this aside, but you need to be aware that this exists. But
yeah,
here's really what we should be focusing on learning right now, and getting your mind to work in a certain way that it can solve the problem you're unfamiliar with, not just learning how to solve all the problems so that anytime a problem is, you can just reach in your bank of how to solve it. That's just not what programming is. And that's like the important thing that I think NewCamp taught me. And it just got me very comfortable with the process of being uncomfortable and feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, because
yeah.
that's what like programming is, every day.
That's the life of a programmer.
And that's the toughest thing. That's the
Fake it
toughest
until you
thing.
make it.
That's the toughest thing to convince students of, though. I think like there's a lot of expectations. And when I was a student too, I kind of came into the boot camp. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn React. I'm going to learn Redux. I'm going to learn state management. I'm going to learn what all of this means. And so then I'm faced with this huge dilemma. Ludo, I wanted to quit like week 4 and 5. I tell students this. I tell students week 4 and 5, I wanted to quit. It was very true.
You're saying week 4 and 5 of React, right?
React, yes.
Yep.
This is where you start to get confronted with the reality that like the pond of programming that you're swimming in is so much bigger than it's actually not a pond, it's an ocean. And there's just so much out there that you're expected not to know, but to learn how to figure out. And I remember talking to my wife, like, I really think I made a mistake. And it wasn't NewCamp's curriculum that discouraged me. It was just this harsh reality that like I've quit my job. I'm on a burning amount of cash reserve to get me through to where I need to go before I need to start really heavily applying for work. And I'm confronted with the fact that I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And so when I'm talking to students about this, and I'm like, you guys are going to be fine, trust me. I can tell and I can see in their eyes that they don't believe me. And why should they, right? Because they're exactly where I was, where I didn't have faith in myself or understand the process. But like the hardest thing to convince students of is that like, it's okay not to know what the heck is going on. It's okay to just like sit there with the harsh reality that this is hard. It's going to take a really long time, way more than a month, to learn how to wrestle with complicated concepts like Redux and action creators and reducer patterns and like state machines and all this stuff. But like what's important is to just learn to trust yourself over time, that if you're faced with a problem you don't know how to solve, you'll like just the confidence in your ability to solve the problem is the difference between somebody who's a professional programmer and somebody who's just getting started.
Yeah.
So,
and I think so. There's a topic right now in the industry, in the coding bootcamp industry, and something that is a little bit controversial, which is coding bootcamp hiring their students to become instructors. And so you're actually one of those. We've hired you as an instructor part-time right after you finish your bootcamp. It's an exception. Usually, actually, I think we have like 10, 15 instructors out of 300 that are past students. But I think what you're describing here, I believe, brings so much value to students. I mean, you're saying it because you've been there in their shoes, experiencing, week 4, week 5 of React. And then you're leaving proof, right, that you can make it and get a job as a software engineer, because you are delivering. You're an instructor on the side with us, but you are a full-time front-end developer at a very interesting. And actually, tell us a little bit about it. Tell us what are you doing, when you're not teaching with NewCamp?
Yeah, like my day job during the week. So I actually work for a startup company based out of New York City. I'm in Buffalo, New York, but the company I work for is based out of New York City. It's called Lunchbox. Without doing a sales pitch for the organization, because I love my company, it's the premise is, during the pandemic, that's when we saw a lot of growth. I think I was the 35th or 36th employee hired. It might be like 38. And since then, we've grown to like 260 people, I think we're at now. With a ton of funding, and we're doing really well for ourselves. What we do is we reach out to restaurants with like 10 to 20 or sometimes 50, 100 locations, mid market, and we realize that like DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub, they're kind of siphoning a ton of money away from these restaurants, even smaller mom and pop shops, right? Like you look at the margins on restaurants, they're incredibly thin. And so our pitch is, okay, like we're going to cut out and then on top of that, you don't get to control your data as a restaurant, right? Like that's all proprietary. Uber Eats and Grubhub, to my understanding, control that. You don't get to see it. You don't get to leverage loyalty programs, none of that. So, what we do is we offer restaurants a solution that's way cheaper. It's like a flat fee structure instead of being like commission based on every order. And restaurants take home, I think on like I don't know this for sure, but I think the numbers are something like on a DoorDash order, if there's $100 order, restaurants take home like $10 with Uber Eats or one of these other. I don't want to get into like legal trouble, but with ours, it's closer to like 30 or 40 after all expenses are paid for.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
So you'd see during the pandemic, especially, you saw a huge growth because companies want first party apps. They want like a web platform for ordering that's not just siphoned away for commissions going out the door. So what we do is I work on the front end team for building, basically building out clients and building out the product. There's tons of restaurants. We just launched our first one in my area that I'm able to eat at. So that's really exciting. And that's kind of my. You've
been able to test your own product with your
Yeah,
rest
I literally,
development?
I just, for the first time today, they launched the product last week. For the first time today, I got a chance to go and eat and order from online the
Cool.
platform that we built. So it's cool.
Did you find any bugs, or were you like, oh shoot, that should have worked differently? Like, no?
I did, but I
Oh yeah.
probably actually that was what today was spent doing, was fixing a bug I found during my order. But
Cool.
it wasn't
And
a
we have a
big
few
one. It was
questions
one.
online, and Aaron just joined it. Aaron, we're gonna bring you onto the floor in a few minutes. We're gonna take an online question first. Thanks for joining. Oh yeah, hey Michael, nice to be here, Mike. Nice to have you here, Michael. Um, how do you feel? It's a great question. How do you feel you have improved as an instructor as you have simultaneously gotten more experience on the job? Like, how are the two connected? You as an instructor versus you gaining experience on the job.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I was hesitant to teach React at first, was because I knew that the monster that I needed to kind of learn.
Yeah.
HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that's like all basic stuff that you don't need practical application to understand a for loop, right? You can
Mhm.
understand why that might be useful. But with React and building UI components and how it all fits together, that was something I was really nervous about teaching before I had any tangible amount of experience. And I think you have some, like, the thing I've learned about NewCamp is most of the students that I teach are like smarter and faster learners than I was at the same stage. And so they ask really good questions. And as I've taught React, I've had to like really, I've been faced in classes with questions about React lifecycle methods, or really complicated things about like how use effect works under the hood, or anything like that that's just outside of the course of what they've learned that week, but I could tell they've been doing some digging. And so the thing that I like to do is to, in order to indulge that and make sure that I'm kind of helping their curiosity and satisfying what they need to know, it's caused me to have to prepare a lot harder for workshops.
Mm.
And that in turn has made me a better React developer, which means I'm more useful at my work. And then in turn, I learn more from work, and I can bring it back to my students and say, hey, this is a problem. When I'm explaining like map, for example, I can bring up a website that my company built, the platform, and say, hey, like, we're using the map method to go over all of these things.
Yeah.
Map is a super rudimentary, like, fundamental, contrived example. But there's tons of these small things where if I'm talking about state management, I can talk about, practically speaking, like, what does that look like if you were to join a company tomorrow? How might they be handling different conditions of the application's different UI? So to answer the question, I think I've improved probably tenfold as an instructor by becoming a better programmer. But I think there's a flip side to it.
Yeah.
And I think the flip side is you become less, I slowly, as I've learned more, it's been really challenging for me to stay in touch with like the beginner's mindset of like, what do you need to know right now? Right. Because it's fun to go big brain on projects and start going really deep on all this really cool and intricate concepts that I've learned. But, it's also what the other half of the challenge is, not just like forgetting entirely where I was at and how
Yeah.
much I struggled at this stage in the curriculum, and not just saying, oh, I'm so excited to teach you guys how to.
Yeah. I can show you, like, let me show you this, let me show you that,
Right.
and being excited about the technology. Yeah, no,
Right.
that's a good point.
So it
Yeah.
helps and hurts. I think
Yeah.
it helps a ton, right? Because I can answer complicated questions, but I also have to always reel it back in and say, okay, but you guys don't need to know this right now. This is
Yeah.
this is just maybe an example of how it might apply in a large scalable project.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, are you ready to have a conversation with us? I'm assuming you have a question. If you're ready, I'm going to bring you onto the floor. Yeah, you seem to be ready. All right.
Yeah, I just didn't. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you
I just
now.
didn't. Oh, sorry.
Welcome. How are you
I
doing?
just started folding my laundry, but what's up, guys?
Hey,
My
what's
name's
up?
Aaron. Okay, is it 1, 2, 3? You guys and then me?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
all three. And so if you have a question for me or Brandon, please go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just signed up. I've studied. I studied C++ for a little bit, like intro to C++ class, and I've like built my own website with my tutor. We did it from a template. I did a whole bunch of front end mentor projects, which is like you take the Photoshop designs or the Figma designs and you just recreate them. So my knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is pretty good. And I've actually been going back through with a Udemy course by Jonas Schmetman.
Okay, I don't
Um,
know. Yeah.
Is
yeah,
that
one of
is
the
that
Udemy
advanced? Is that
courses.
advanced CSS, right?
Yeah, just going back through just to
Mhm.
review like my basic CSS knowledge because um yeah, I was living in Spain teaching English and I just started studying a lot of code because my idea was eventually go into a web development job around there. And so as I came back to the US, I said, well, um I'd like to get back into it and really find just like whatever job. So I guess the big question would be like, what's the best thing to do to get prepared? Um, Not only just for me, but for anyone else who might be listening.
Yeah.
Listening.
And you've enrolled in the Web Development Fundamentals
Mm,
Bootcamp, right? All right.
right.
So, Brandon, how would you say how should people prepare themselves for the beginners bootcamp, the 4-week one? That's a great question, Aaron.
That's a great question.
The,
So
the 17, the mobile. I'm going into the
Oh, you
17.
want to? Yeah. How do you prepare? Well, I guess we can say, how do you prepare overall to join a coding
Yeah,
bootcamp,
maybe you
right?
could go
yeah,
more broadly
What's
for
the
any
best
of them.
way? Yeah.
I think if a boot camp does it the right way, you don't have to prepare at all. But that being said, that's like super. That sounds like I prepared that. I swear I didn't. But what I would say though is I would say that any amount of preparation and like studying ahead is not a bad thing. If you're, let's say you're 3 weeks out, it sounds like you have a really good foundation of CSS, HTML, JavaScript, things that you're going to learn at a very basic level once you start back over from the beginning, and that's not a bad thing. But what I would say is in order to get prepared, what I would really encourage you to do. So are you doing the intro to HTML, or are you you're going from bootcamp onward?
Um, I've already done that stuff like a bunch.
Right.
So and I took like the JavaScript core the little quiz and stuff.
Assessment. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so I'm more going into just reviewing like CSS layouts and Flexbox and grid and that kind of stuff just to review my knowledge
Sure.
so that
You're gonna
I
be
can
just fine then. You're gonna be just fine.
You're gonna be
yeah.
fine.
What you could do, I mean, I think you're gonna breeze through the first 2 to 3 weeks
Mm.
of the beginners bootcamp. The 4th week, we're gonna go into DOM manipulation in straight JavaScript, no jQuery, no nothing. And so, if you want to really prepare, I think you can look into that. But I think the first 4 weeks is gonna be just fine for you. And then full stack, I think you're gonna probably experience like everybody else. Full stack, the first 6 to 7 weeks are going to be just fine, and then you're going to hit React week 4
Yeah.
and 5, and then that's when you're going to feel the pain. Hopefully,
Right.
Yeah. What I'll say though is that you can't get enough like JavaScript. It sounds like
Yeah.
it sounds like you're doing a lot of CSS and layouts, and that's going to set you apart probably at the application process from a lot of folks, because software engineering is, I hate to say it, but like a lot of the folks I work with, very, very talented. They make me look like I just learned how to program with all of the architectural stuff they can do with UIs. But one of the things that made me stand out as well, just like it sounds like you, is that I had a really good understanding of CSS, SCSS, and post processors and Tailwind. And I love visual, right? I love making things visually look good. That was great. But what I think I would suggest for you to do is to kind of mitigate the pain that Ludo's talking about, is to just go on YouTube. Even after this call, I can post some YouTube videos I suggest to everybody. I always send them to my React class on like object-oriented programming in JavaScript, on what are for loops and variables, the map method, all of anything you can learn in advance is only going to help you when that time comes. And I think that I would just hard press like JavaScript fundamentals.
Right.
Yeah.
Just pedal to the metal on that.
Hey, we actually have more questions coming in. Aaron, thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you. I wish you good luck for the 4 weeks bootcamp. I'm guessing that's the one starting on April 11th, I think.
No, I'm going into the 17, so I'm not doing the intro to fundamentals.
Oh, okay. You're going straight to full stack.
I'm not going to do, I signed up for the 17-week course.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've done a whole bunch like map, filter, reduce, like a bunch of the fundamentals.
Yeah, you're good on that. Yeah, you're good on that. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So good luck. Good. So I think it's the front end then. Well,
Yeah, front end.
all right, perfect. Hey, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining. Really appreciate it, and good luck.
Mhm.
All right, there is another question from Cody. And then I see Mark Anthony is actually has joined us live using the dialing link. But Mark, if you want to join us and ask your question, we need to actually have you switch on your video. So switch on your video. There you go. We can see you. Hey. So we'll get to you after that, Mark. Okay, Cody, question for you. In terms of project, I mean, that's building your projects is a big deal, and every aspiring developer, is being told and hears everywhere that hey, you have to build your project. You have to build your project. What was it in your case? How did you handle that aspect?
Yeah, I did the portfolio project for NewCamp. It was this very basic, like nicely enough styled tool where you could, if let's say you're having a board game night with your friends, you just want to do a random team generator, right? So I did that in vanilla JavaScript and I did that in React, and that was my first foray into React. And that whole process of learning this own project that was like this original piece of work was really tough. What I would say though is I'm probably different than most cases, but I'll give the advice I give my students, and then I'll tell you how I did it. The advice I give my students is that when you're applying for a job, nobody cares if you have a CS degree or not. Like that's been my experience. I applied to like 70 places. Okay, I was interviewing with quite a few. None of them cared. The first thing that they cared about was, do you have an active GitHub portfolio, and do you have one or two projects that we can just like skim through so we can get a quick pulse on what your coding ability is, right? And those projects don't even have to be finished. Okay, that's probably the first controversial thing I'll say about that. And finished is great, right? But like something is better than nothing. And if you have code, you can walk them through in a technical interview and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. I'm really passionate about it. That's going to make you stand out. In my case, I did have a couple of portfolio projects like the one I mentioned. And then past that, at the time that I was applying, I had just like a ton of unfinished work. I did front end mentor, like Aaron just mentioned.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of small like components that I would build. And I had probably started like 7 or 8 random projects to learn different things, learn different frameworks. And so when I went into my first interview, I knew that my very first portfolio project wasn't that impressive. But luckily in the technical interview, they asked me, hey, can you walk us through some things you've worked on or what you're working on now? And so I had a panic moment because I didn't have anything finished or polished that was this beautiful React application that had all this like this back end and completed stuff. I just had like a ton of like code pens. I had a ton of like unfinished GitHub projects that I would walk them through, and I'd be like, actually, here's one I'm working on right now. I just pulled it up and ran it on my computer, and I said, it's not done, but let's walk through what it is, right? And so this is the idea behind it. I'm really excited, and we walk through the code. So what people will probably tell you is first, it's portfolio projects are the most important thing. Then after that, it's probably soft skills and your ability to communicate. That's like the most important thing. And then from there, it's years of experience, whatever that means. And then it's whether or not you have a degree. But between what I tell students and the way I did it is I feel like I had good enough soft skills in the interview that I seemed like I was a cool guy to work with, who was down to learn anything I needed to, who was clearly working very hard and trying to do a bunch of things at once to learn as much as I could. And I think that's why they took a chance on me.
Yeah, it's a great thing, great point. What I'll say about what I just heard you describe is, it's not so much about the I want to say the quality of your project portfolio. I mean, of course, it is about the quality of the portfolio, but it's more about you being able to be eloquent about it and how you talk about the code that you wrote. There's two situations, right? When you're interviewing a junior developer and you ask him to walk you through the code, either the junior developer copy and pasted existing code into the project and doesn't exactly understand how the code works. And so when you ask that person, okay, walk me through what the code works, why did you do it this way? It's, what you hear is not really what you were hoping for. Or you have an aspiring developer who actually built the code, didn't pull it from anywhere, knows exactly what the code is doing and why it's doing it, and is very eloquent talking about that piece of code. And that code can be just, I don't know, 500 lines of code with a few functions. And maybe it doesn't do much, but being able to actually talk about it, being eloquent about it, and being very precise in terms of what exactly the code is doing and is not doing. I think that's a big difference. And of course, that you're going to get there if you pass the earlier stages of being, reviewed and people are saying, okay, we're going to bring that person into an interview. But once you're there, it's really how eloquent you can be describing your code.
Yeah, I agree so much. And I'll say, I've interviewed junior developers before. I've come a long way at the company that I'm at, and I've learned so much. And what I will say is I've seen portfolios that have the Netflix clone, the Spotify clone, all these like YouTube projects, right? And then I'll see somebody who has like this ridiculously not styled, maybe doesn't look good calculator app that does something very, very niche, right? Or whatever specific purpose that person wanted to serve. Like 10 times out of 10, my first subconscious bias is I'm more interested in the person that tried to solve the problem by themselves, and it might not look that great. It might not even work. But I would much rather take a chance on somebody who's trying than somebody who's done, these Spotify, Netflix clone
copy work.
It's copy work, right? You're not engaging with the material. And that's not to say those are bad things. I've done them. I still do them just because I'm trying to learn new things. But for me, it serves two different purposes. I'm trying to learn something, let me follow this tutorial, versus I'm trying to create something that will get me employed that I can take credit for as my own. So that's one big thing I'll say. And then the other thing is like just 6 unfinished ambitious projects is worth more than one simple project you already know how to do everything for. That's the other thing is I would rather interview somebody who's got like 8 projects where like in one they tried Redux, and another they tried Vue, and another they tried Angular, and another they like that. To me shows in like curiosity that you're trying to learn other things, rather than somebody who makes something that is just this very vanilla application that tons and tons of people have done before.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Hey, Mark, we're going to bring you onto the floor. Be ready to ask your question.
Sure.
All right. Thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Hey.
Hi, Ludo. Hi, Brendan. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
I'm doing awesome, man. Good to see you.
I'm in Brendan's class right now. I'm in React Week 5. That's why my muscles are depleting, because I haven't had any time to go to the gym. So I just want to brag about how I think how well the real world advice is. Brendan said, if you need to step away from like the material, step away from the material. I'll be honest. I realized that I'm understanding React like a week behind. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
hey, you know what? If it's just 1 week behind, you're good.
I don't know, man. That's what.
Week behind in understanding. I mean, some people, it's going to take a month before really understanding what just happened and what React is about. So a week behind is great.
I'll be honest that this is a hard. You're just reiterating what they said earlier, that this is a hard week. And you kind of touched on this already, Brendan, but I have 2 questions now because of what you said. How do you demonstrate working with teammates if you don't have teammates to work with, so that you can like come across so you can communicate that you're ready to work on projects with others?
Yeah, that's a good question. The beautiful thing about that is that many of us who've come into the bootcamp have previous work experience, and collaborating with a team or solving specific problems, and that doesn't require coding skill. And I leaned really heavily on that when I was interviewing, right? I had managed people before. I had dealt with miscommunication that caused project failures. All of that those types of skills were really transferable. When I was just honest in my interviews and saying like, hey, I've never worked on a large scale GitHub project with a bunch of people in an open source format or whatever before, but I'm familiar with how they work. I'm willing to learn it. And here are some examples of real world projects that I worked on that aren't coding related, but speak to my ability to collaborate with the team, communicate well, and and here's the end result of the project. That's like really probably like cookie cutter advice, but it's really true. You kind of have to lean into the skills that you have and be honest about what you don't know. Because if I just had come in there and been like, yeah, I'm contributing to open source projects, and I didn't know anything about that world. One, they're going to see right through me, and 2, I'm going to be way out of my element in trying to, come up with a scenario in which I can make myself employable based on that alone. So, I hope you're satisfied with that question, but with that answer. But it's how I really feel.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, Mark. Great question. Are you trying to look for classmates to work on projects together? How is it happening?
Yeah, because I'm working on a project that speaking of copy work.
That's fine. And while you're learning, it's perfect. I mean, you want to start there. Right. Yeah. But then you want to build on top of it, I guess.
I still do copy work.
I'm going to be honest, like on the bottom of the website that I'm building with in React, that I've got these little links. So Brendan encouraged us to he's like, hey, insert components, like random components, right? That do random stuff. So I've got on the bottom of my NewCamp website, I've got a calculator, so you can go and insert. You can go into a calculator component. I've got a dating app, so I'm already thinking about like how you have to like confirm that people are adults. So it's like projecting like, oh, I guess we're gonna learn this later on in the course, right? In the full stack course, that there's got to be a way where you can confirm that someone's 18. Aside from just a checkbox, I hope, because that's all I've got, right? I've got like, hey, did they check the box? Now they can enter into this dating website, right? So, so that's the practice that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create random components and put them in my website, and then I'd love to work on, since it's easy to just be like, add a component, take a component, modify a component. I'd love to find students that I could work with, but I know that just practically speaking, Ludo, I think it's hard to be on the same sort of timetable as other people.
Yeah.
And it's if I could put it one way, I don't know what I don't know in terms of partnering with a person, right? I don't know how to navigate that and say, hey, look, this is what we don't know, so let's try to cover it together. So it's been easier, unfortunately, to just go solo. But I'd like to work with folks.
I had that same problem.
There's a ton of value in working with someone else and experiencing being on different time zones or working at different times. That's also a lot of the Git aspects of handling a project comes into play. How you're going to do branches and merging them. You can play with branches and merging when you're a solo programmer, but really doesn't make much sense. But once you have, once you're in a team of just two, you can start to really play with that. So yeah, good luck with trying that. But hey, it was great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining. Good luck with React. Matt was saying online that it gets better with React Native, which is true for some. So all right, you're gone. Take care, Mark.
See you, Mark.
There is another question that I want to take on online. Oh, there you go. Hold on. So you've been on the hunt as well. You've been looking for a job like 2 years ago now when you finished and graduated from the bootcamp. I don't know. I can't really remember how the market was at the time 2 years ago. It's always been a bit rough when you're a junior developer trying to find your first gig. It's getting harder now. But so this is what Zach is saying right now. Huge requirements for entry level. Have you had that type of experience? Like, have you seen those type of posts, and what would you tell someone who's graduating that, how do I handle that?
That's like a real problem. It's definitely one it's become a meme, right? Like 5+ years and you need to know 10 languages, but it really does exist. There are companies that ask that. I just steered clear of them. And it's probably really tough. I just had to be really more regimented about how I filtered out like where I was applying. There's definitely such a thing as over applying for jobs, because my approach, and this is from when I was in operations and I was reviewing resumes and all of that, is that I know that I would respond better as somebody hiring to a resume that was tailored to the job that they were applying for, as opposed to just a copy paste, send it out to everybody. So if it was something that they were asking me for 5+ years and all this ridiculous stuff, realistically speaking, I know that I'm not the best candidate, and that's not a confidence thing. That's a fact thing. If they need somebody with 5+ years and 10 languages, and I only know one of them, and I have less than 1 year, I'm shooting myself in the foot, and I'm wasting my time, which is incredibly valuable, by applying there in the first place. I will say they might be harder to find, but there are so many of these jobs that are actually entry level junior developer hiring positions that are worthy of your time. They might be a little more competitive because there's tons of people that are applying to these types of jobs. But what I tended to find was that startups in general are more welcome to newer developers and entry level roles, because typically they're looking for an intern or somebody who knows the basics, but they'll teach you the rest. And I was very lucky in the company that I hired because they took that chance on me. And that's kind of what you're looking for. You're not looking to go in and land one of these crazy requirement jobs. You just want one that has realistic explanations. It might say 2 years of JavaScript experience. Apply anyway. Just be honest and upfront with them. Yeah. Apply anyway. Be upfront with them, and they're going to say, "Hey, so I see that you have, you put on your resume." They say, "Hey, we have 2 years resume, 2 years of experience," and say, "No, but here's all the projects I built."
No, exactly. You're going to write 2 years because at the end of the day, you want someone who really understands JavaScript. And if you can demonstrate that you understand JavaScript, even though it's been a year, that's going to be fine.
That's the thing too, is like you'll have phone screenings before your resume is even looked at.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would blast my resume out to these places that I thought I was qualified for, but like might say 2 years. And I didn't say that I had 2 years. I wouldn't lie on my resume, but they would call me anyway as a screening. And then they'd say, wow, he's a charismatic guy. Seems to know what he's talking about. Let's pass him through. That happens way more than you'd think. It's just a
social skill at first. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be evaluated a lot with the social skills.
It's it's a big part.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about you again. So, so you're enrolled in the bootcamp. You're full-time now. How much time did you give yourself? Like, did you have a timeline in mind with you and your wife?
Yeah, yeah, we did.
Hey, you have that much, we have that much run rate, and this needs to happen during that time. And how did you manage the whole thing?
I wanna, what's really funny is no, I wasn't muted. Okay.
No, you're good. Okay. You're good.
What's funny about that is like you look at YouTube or you look at like these like how to get a job as a junior developer, right? And it's like this huge clickbait type thing.
Yeah.
And I pictured, when I look back and I pictured myself, like I would love to just think that I like was this like wake up every day at 6, grind, like learn how to code, don't stop, like don't take breaks. Like I could have worked harder, I was trying to be, and my wife was really good at like making sure I was easy on myself and patient. And that's like there's one thing I want to communicate. It's not to be lazy. It's just that to get this image out of your mind of this, I have to be this like grinding hustle, like learn at your own pace. It's like any step forward is progress well made. And as much as I'd love to just be like, oh, I woke up early and grinded it out, I really didn't. I had a very strict, disciplined schedule that I would spend like 4 to 5 hours a day because I was unemployed. Thank God I had the time to just do either get through my NewCamp assignments in that 2 hours, and then the rest I would just like try to get done, or I'd break it out throughout the day.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was working full time, I would have to obviously prioritize it differently and use my time. But to be honest, like it was more important for me to be consistent than it was for me to put in crazy hours. And 2 hours every single day was way more beneficial for me when I was learning than it would have been if I just did 5 hours, 7 hours every single day. I would have burned myself out. And so
I think what you just said is so true. What mattered to you was to be consistent and to have a routine versus really trying to grind it out and spend like 8 hours, 10 hours and burn out. Consistency, is the most important trait, I guess, for if you want to learn, if you want to become a web developer.
Yeah, and for me, I was a slow learner, I would say. Like none of React came easy to me. It wasn't until after React Native was done that I started to understand what state management was. Okay, so like I was still working on my React app from my portfolio project when I got to React Native, and I didn't understand it. And then certain things in React Native started to click that I was like, oh, I see how we're doing it now. That's why we did it that way earlier. And so there's, like Mark Anthony said earlier, there's a lag time, and if you're only a week behind, you're actually probably like 7 weeks ahead of where you should be.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And if I could add one more thing to that, it's that like when I was learning and trying to learn all of this, it was knowing when to stop and knowing when to walk away and knowing when just like it's just not going to stick. I would give myself that advice because there was plenty of times where I would just bang my head at a concept, at something like Redux, to not understand it, to try to draw diagrams and arrows, when if I just walked away and came back at it the next day, it would have been fine. So for me, it was just a consistent routine of a few hours a day, sometimes more if I could afford it and I had the sanity for it. And I was just consistent. I took weekends off like I normally would have, and I'm very fortunate it worked.
So a healthy routine, really. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't have to burn out. I want to go back to something you said earlier and spend more time on really understanding how that worked. So you said that you really felt like you were going to quit when the core of React hit, and that you at that moment in time you were really wondering if that type of profession was for you.
Yeah.
How did you get past that decision, and what made you not quit? How did you not quit at that moment?
Yeah. I had a really good support
a lot
system.
of people are experiencing that at some point.
Yeah. I'm sure they are.
Not quit.
I anticipated it almost every single class that I teach in React. I just know when it's going to hit. I try to prepare for it and say, look, be kind to yourselves. This is going to smack you in the face. And how did I not quit? I had a really good support system. Like my wife was my rock throughout the entire process. You know, I get emotional talking about it, but she was really encouraging and would help me kind of, you know, channel whatever negativity or doubts I had on, you know, just reinforcing that like I made the right choice, that, you know, helping me. I would try to teach things to her in programming, right? Even though she doesn't program at all, just so that I could kind of understand it, and she would be able to recognize and point out progress that I made. That's the first thing. The second thing was I really felt like I had no other choice. I kind of made this bed and I have to sleep in it now. You know, I've come so far. Why would I just throw this all away? And the third thing was it started to click around like certain things started to click in that delay cycle around the same time that I was having these doubts, and that helped me reinforce it. Right. So maybe I had just learned about, I don't know, the map method, right. And how that works and how that controls UI elements. 3 or 4 weeks later, right, when I'm starting, like when we're hitting like week 5 of React, now I'm finally understanding how map works. I don't know how anything else works, okay? But like I'm starting to understand, and it's starting to click that there's a lag time to this, that like just repetition is going to help me understand, and there's going to be a moment where it clicks. That's the final thing. So I think a combination of those 3 things is getting, you know, understanding that like I can learn this and restoring confidence in myself to learn. That's like there's a whole new process. My wife as a support system was another huge thing. And then also kind of the uncomfortable reality that, you know, I've taken a large chance on myself, and I at least owe it to myself to see it through.
So really, I mean, being patient with yourself, and people talk about, you know, trust the process, but there is truth to that. You have to trust the process of learning, which in this case has a delay, and nobody's prepared for that, because you don't learn with a delay in school, right? I mean, there's that concept of learning with a delay. It doesn't necessarily exist. I guess you could compare that to learning to, you know, to run a bike for the first time.
Sure. Yeah.
You're failing all the time until you don't anymore, and then all of a sudden you know to run a bike. But it's because you failed so many times before that at some point it clicks, and that's very much it, right? You're gonna fall off. You're gonna not be able to code for a long time until it's gonna click.
Yeah, I have one more thing to say on that. I know we're almost out of time, but I think it's a good parable of kind of what my growth as a developer has been. And I think coming into the bootcamp, we talked about earlier how I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, or a trade skill, or something that I felt like I could actually add irreplaceable value to an organization. Meaning, like if any of my previous jobs, if they replaced me, it was fine. The market was flooded with people that knew exactly how to do it, right? What I did. And that's fine. That I still was valuable, but it was just harder for me to see it and feel it. But there was a turning point in learning how to program. And for anybody that knows cars, this is going to sound probably like the dumbest, easiest thing, but you have to understand that like I didn't have this confidence in myself, in my life, or my skills or ability to learn. And so I remember my wife and I were going on a road trip to her family reunion, and on the way back we got this engine light that went off. And I remember, like, at this point in time, I was starting to build confidence in myself as a programmer. And previously, if you knew anything about me, I wouldn't touch a car. I wouldn't try to figure it out. I would just kind of send it off to a dealer, or call for a tow and figure, you know, and just let it be. But I remember like kind of having this new mindset as things were starting to click after I had graduated from, after I had graduated from NewCamp. It was that summer. And I knew we were across the country. I didn't want to bring it to somewhere else. So I said, let me just like borrow an OBD scanner from somebody and plug it in and see what the problem is. I saw what the problem was. I had no idea what a solenoid was. Okay. But what I did then is I just looked up on YouTube, how to replace a solenoid, found out that there was a part at the local store that I could go get. And it was an hour process of me like just going in there, changing out the solenoid for another one, and boom, the car was running. And so like, I think for a lot of people, programming is, for me, this whole like learning to program thing is something I'm going to try to teach my kids. You know, I've got a son on the way. He's going to be here in July, and it's going to be so important for me to kind of instill this like sense of problem solving and confidence in yourself, that yes, there's something in front of you that's unfamiliar that you don't need to know anything about. The knowledge is out there. There's resources for you to learn it and get better. And that to me is like the value of NewCamp, the value of programming. That's to me is like a life lesson. I honestly tell all my friends who are like
problem solving.
Yeah,
Being the
yeah,
greatest Googler on earth. That's
yeah.
what they teach you.
But more importantly, it's like learning to trust yourself that you will learn it. That's my whole job now. I get assigned tasks. I don't know how to do any of them. I'm working with new frameworks all the time, and I'll forget it as soon as I learn it. But the fact of the matter is, I have so much more confidence in myself. If somebody presents me with a problem that I didn't know nothing about, instead of me saying, "Oh man, what's going to go wrong?" It's, yeah, sure. I did something like this probably a month or two ago, and I figured it out and was okay. So that's kind of the closing thing I'll say.
That's a brilliant analogy. I really love the car analogy. Let's see. Well, we're on time. There's I think. Do you want to take one more question? Let's take one more.
I'm here for this. I'm here as long as you'd like to be.
All right, let's take that question. Oh, and I remember I saw actually baseball. I saw what you wrote earlier, and being appreciative of what we're trying to do. Thank you for saying that. It's somewhere in the chat. But here you have a question. So you're currently in IT, and by the time you're going to start to apply for web development jobs, you'll have 2.5 years of IT experience. Do hiring managers value this? What do you think, Brendan?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm not a huge IT guy myself, and remember, I don't have a background in computer science, so I'm going to talk through the only lens I can. Is that if I'm hiring somebody who's familiar with terminology or has IT experience and maybe some DevOps experience, that's all incredibly valuable to a tech organization in some way or another. And of course, I think it would help you. I think you'd have a huge advantage over somebody coming in with like zero IT experience. Is it going to make or break the hiring decision? I can't say that. For me, we probably wouldn't, because I'm looking for a good engineer, somebody who understands the tech stack at a rudimentary level that I could teach the more complicated concepts. But if you're able to come in and your IT experience has taught you things about DevOps, and you understand how servers work, of course that's going to benefit your ability to learn the material a lot faster, and then also articulate that in an interview. So I absolutely throw it on your resume and talk to your experience in IT. But just understand that engineering and IT and infrastructure are two different fields that have some overlap. If you were to draw the Venn diagram, that it's definitely valuable, and people will value it. But also make sure that don't lean on it too much. You want to become a good engineer, and that's why you want to be hired.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll add something to that, which is 2.5 years of IT experience. I'll say is just right. Sometimes you'll hear people who've been on in the same job for too long. Like if you had been, in the IT space for like 15 years, some people may look at that and say, okay, what do you want to change? I mean, what was wrong with IT? And they will actually wonder about your motivation. But 2.5 years, that's perfect. Yeah. So, all right. Hey, Brandon, it was fantastic to have you on the show. I really, really appreciate everything you're doing for your students. Really, thank you for sharing your story as well.
Yeah.
I know it's late for you, and appreciate also you taking the time on a Friday night. You want to say a few last words, maybe?
Last words is just a huge thank you to you, a huge thank you to the entire NewCamp community, because I wouldn't have the position to teach and help people that were in a similar situation to me when I first started, and hopefully encourage them. And then a couple of just key shout outs to instructors that made a massive impact on me, Christopher Itoki and Matt Moser, both huge mentors to me. What I will say to anybody watching this is, if you need a mentor or you want somebody else that you can bounce ideas off of, please reach out to me. My name is Brendan Roman. He's right there on the screen. You can find me on Slack in the NewCamp channel. But then also leverage all of the instructors in the community. It's not just the one instructor you have. It's build the community and network of people that are going to help and support you, your peers, other instructors. Don't be afraid to reach out to any one of us, because you never know who knows somebody who might know somebody who's looking for the skill set that you have. So I'll end it there, and just thank you so much for having me. This has been an honor.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for joining and for showing all the love and support. Really appreciate it. Like and subscribe. I always forget to say that. Like and subscribe. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend. See you, Brandon.